The first time I touched the vampire queen, her entire throne turned against me to keep me alive. Daniel Mercer had crossed the Nevada desert before dawn for the kind of job honest men took only when rent was late and options were thin. He was 34 years old, white, tired around the eyes, and built more like a man who fixed trucks than a man who won wars. His old service van rattled along a forgotten highway 15 miles outside Red Hollow, carrying 2 toolboxes, a cracked thermos of coffee, and a stack of unpaid bills shoved into the glove compartment where he did not have to look at them. The sky ahead was still dark blue, but the edge of sunrise had begun to burn behind the mountains, turning the sand and scrub brush the color of rusted copper. Daniel had been hired to inspect a dead communications beacon near an abandoned mining road, one of those emergency towers that private security companies forgot existed until something expensive stopped working. He expected bad wiring, heat damage, maybe a snake curled inside the control box. He did not expect the road to be covered in black ash. He slowed the van, headlights cutting across strange marks in the dust, long curved grooves like something heavy had been dragged across the desert floor. The air smelled wrong, not like smoke exactly, but like cold metal left in the sun. His radio cracked with static, then with a woman's voice so faint he almost thought it was inside his own head. "Do not open the eastern gate. Dawn has already betrayed me." Daniel braked hard. The van shuddered to a stop beside the beacon tower. For a moment, nothing moved except dry wind pushing sand against the tires. Then he saw her beneath the ruined archway of the old mine entrance, half hidden in the shadow of collapsed stone. She was tall, pale, and dressed in torn black royal fabric threaded with silver, like someone had pulled a queen out of a nightmare and left her in the desert to disappear. Her white skin looked almost luminous against the darkness. Her long dark hair spilled over one shoulder, and a broken black crown rested crookedly near her hand. She tried to rise when the first line of sunlight touched the rocks, but her strength failed. Daniel knew every sensible thing he should do. Call emergency services. Stay in the van. Do not approach the impossible woman with crimson eyes and a crown that seemed to drink the light around it. Instead, he grabbed his heavy work coat, ran across the gravel, and dropped to one knee beside her. Her eyes opened, ancient and red, full of pain she was too proud to show. "Human," she whispered. "Leave me." Daniel slid one arm behind her shoulders, careful and steady. Not happening. The sunrise climbed fast, spilling gold over the mine road. The moment the light touched her sleeve, the fabric smoked at the edges and she went rigid with silent agony. Daniel wrapped his coat around her, lifted her into his arms, and staggered toward the shadow of the beacon station. She was lighter than she should have been, cold as winter glass, but the air around her pulsed with power that made every loose screw on his tool belt tremble. "You do not know what you carry," she said. "Then explain it after we get inside." Each step felt longer than a mile. The sun grew brighter. The coat in his arms grew hot. Behind them, buried beneath the sand, something massive awakened with a low stone groan. Daniel looked back and saw the abandoned mine entrance reshaping itself into black pillars and silver doors, a hidden throne gate rising from the desert as if the earth itself remembered royalty. The woman's hand slipped from the coat and brushed his wrist. A single drop of dark red blood touched his skin. It did not hurt. It burned cold. A mark spread across his palm, shaped like a throne encircled by thorns. The shadow from the hidden gate leapt across the ground and covered him like a shield. Inside the darkness, dozens of pale figures appeared, kneeling in the sand with lowered swords and stunned faces. One of them looked at Daniel as if a mechanic had just rewritten 1,000 years of law. "By blood law," the figure said, voice shaking. "The throne has recognized him." The queen in Daniel's arms opened her eyes again, and this time fear broke through the power in them. "What have you done?" Daniel looked from the kneeling court to the burning dawn. Behind him, still holding the dying queen like the most dangerous responsibility in the world. "I think," he said, breathing hard, "I just ruined both our mornings." Daniel did not understand the kneeling figures, the buried throne gate, or the mark burning cold across his palm, but he understood one thing clearly. The woman in his arms was running out of time. The shadow that had leapt from the gate protected them from the direct sunrise, but the light kept pressing against its edges like something with teeth. The queen's body trembled once beneath his work coat. It was the smallest movement, barely more than a shiver, yet every kneeling vampire in the sand reacted as if a cathedral bell had cracked overhead. "Move," Daniel said. No one did. They stared at him with pale faces, lowered swords, and eyes full of shock too old to be simple fear. He shifted the queen carefully against his chest, trying to keep the coat over her face and shoulders. "I said move. If that gate is yours, open it wider. If there is a doctor, healer, medic, whatever you call it, get them ready." A tall vampire in dark ceremonial armor rose halfway from his kneel. His skin was white, his hair silver, and his expression had the controlled panic of a man watching sacred law happen in the wrong order. "Human, you may not command the Crimson Court." Daniel looked at the woman in his arms, at the tight line of pain around her mouth, then back at the silver-haired vampire. "Then pretend she did." The queen's eyes opened a fraction. A weak crimson glow moved beneath her lashes. "Lord Vare," she whispered, voice thin but still sharpened by authority. "Let him pass." The silver-haired vampire stiffened. The others bowed lower. "Your Majesty, the inner hall has not been purified. The dawn breach may have contaminated the gate. The court protocol requires that you be examined before crossing." Daniel almost laughed, but there was no humor in him. "She is dying in my arms, and your first concern is hallway etiquette?" A ripple moved through the kneeling court. Several faces tightened in offense. One young armored guard looked at Daniel as if he wanted to drag him away, but the mark on Daniel's palm flared, and every sword point on the ground flashed dark red in response. The guard froze. Lord Vare's eyes dropped to the mark. "Blood law recognizes him as Throne Shield," he said, not to Daniel, but to the court itself. "No hand may remove him from the queen while the mark burns." "Good," Daniel said. "Then stop wasting it." He walked toward the rising gate before anyone could invent another reason to let her suffer. The black pillars ahead groaned wider, revealing a corridor that should not have fit beneath an abandoned Nevada mine. It stretched into the earth in polished obsidian and silver, lit by red glass lamps that seemed to pulse like slow heartbeats. Cool air rolled out, carrying the scent of rain, old stone, and something faintly metallic. Daniel stepped inside with the queen wrapped in his coat, and the desert heat vanished behind them so suddenly that his breath fogged. The court followed at a distance, whispering in a language that slid across the walls like water over knives. Daniel caught only a few English words. Blood law, human, throne shield, impossible. He ignored all of them. The queen's hand tightened weakly against his sleeve. "You should have left me outside. That is a bad habit people seem to have around you." Her eyes found his, ancient and exhausted. "What habit?" "Telling me to leave you places." Something like disbelief touched her face. Not amusement. Not yet. More like she had forgotten that anyone could answer her, as if she were a person and not a crown. The corridor opened into a vast underground hall. Daniel stopped despite himself. It was not a cave. It was a hidden palace beneath the desert, all black stone balconies, silver bridges, and a ceiling filled with artificial stars. At the far end stood a throne carved from dark crystal, and above it hung a suspended crown of red light that flickered violently as the queen weakened. The moment Daniel entered, the throne reacted. A deep vibration rolled through the floor, through his boots, up his bones. The red light above the throne reached toward him in thin threads, not touching the queen, but touching the mark on his palm. The court gasped. Lord Vare stepped forward, horrified. "The throne is shielding the human. Can it shield her too?" Daniel asked. "It shields what the blood law names essential to the crown. She is the crown. And now," Lord Vare said, staring at Daniel as if the words offended the whole shape of history, "so are you." Daniel did not have time to unpack that disaster. A group of white-robed healers rushed in from a side arch carrying crystal instruments and a long black recovery table. The queen's body stiffened when she saw them. Daniel felt it. The fear was almost invisible, buried under centuries of control, but it was there. "No restraints," she whispered. One healer hesitated. "Your Majesty, the dawn sickness may cause instability. Standard royal recovery requires binding the patient to prevent accidental movement." Daniel turned his head slowly. She said no. The healer looked to Lord Vare. Lord Vare looked to the throne. The red crown light flashed once, and every metal clasp on the recovery table unlocked by itself. Daniel carried the queen to the table and lowered her carefully onto it, keeping his coat around her shoulders until the healers replaced it with a dark protective mantle. She caught his wrist before he could step back. Her fingers were cold, but her grip had command in it now. "Your name?" "Daniel Mercer. I am Queen Evangeline Noctara. I figured you were someone important when the furniture started making legal decisions." For the first time, the corner of her mouth moved. Not a smile anyone in the court would have recognized, but enough that Daniel saw the woman behind the title. The healers began their work with pale blue light and silver instruments. No cutting, no blood, only a soft radiance that drew the sunrise damage out of her skin like mist leaving glass. The red crown above the throne steadied, and the entire hall seemed to breathe again. Then a second voice cut through the relief from the upper balcony, smooth and cold as a knife hidden in velvet. "How fortunate that our queen survived long enough to hand the throne to a stranger." Every face turned upward. A white-haired vampire woman stood beneath a black banner, dressed in high-collared silver and midnight blue. Her eyes fixed not on Evangeline, but on Daniel's marked hand. Lord Vare's voice lowered. "Duchess Marceline." Daniel looked at the queen, and the queen did not look surprised. She looked tired, as if the betrayal had arrived exactly on schedule. The Duchess smiled down at the hall. "Court witnesses, record this moment. Our queen returns from dawn in the arms of a human, and the blood loss shields him before it shields her. Tell me, Daniel Mercer, did she choose you, or did the dying throne choose its next weakness?" The healing lights around Evangeline flickered. Daniel felt every ancient eye in the hall turn toward him. The mark on his palm cooled until his whole arm went numb, and the throne behind him whispered in a language he could not understand, waiting for his answer. The throne whispered again, and every vampire in the underground hall heard it differently. Daniel heard it like wind moving through an old house. The court seemed to hear a verdict. Queen Evangeline lay on the black recovery table beneath a veil of blue healing light, pale and weakened, but still watching the balcony with the calm of someone who had expected the knife long before it appeared. Duchess Marceline stood above them in silver and midnight blue, her white face flawless, her expression composed, her smile sharpened by years of waiting for exactly this moment. Daniel could feel the hall measuring him. A white human mechanic with desert dust on his boots, coffee breath, sunburn at the edge of his collar, and no reason to belong in a palace buried under Nevada. The mark on his palm burned cold. The red crown above the throne flickered toward him as if waiting for him to say something worthy of a law he did not understand. "I am going to be honest," Daniel said, looking up at Marceline. "I have no idea what your throne wants." A few vampires shifted like honesty itself had broken protocol. Marceline's smile widened. "A useful confession. But I know what she wanted." Daniel pointed to Evangeline without touching her. "She wanted me to leave her outside. I chose not to. That is not a conspiracy. That is basic decency." "Decency," Marceline repeated, as if tasting a childish word. "The favorite religion of people who have never ruled." Evangeline's eyes narrowed faintly. "Careful, Duchess." The healing light brightened with her voice, but then wavered, showing the cost of every word. Daniel glanced at the healers. They looked terrified to ask the queen to stay silent. So he did it for them. "Your Majesty, maybe save the royal thunder until you can sit up without the furniture panicking." The hall went completely still. Lord Vare looked as if he had just watched a man step on a sacred relic. Evangeline stared at Daniel for one breath, then two. Something almost amused passed through her crimson eyes, quickly buried under pain and pride. "You speak recklessly for a man protected by a law he does not understand. I fix things for people who never read manuals. I am used to it." The throne's red light steadied, and the blue healing glow around Evangeline became smoother. One of the healers whispered, "Her pulse is stabilizing." That tiny sentence shifted the entire hall. Daniel felt it. So did Marceline. The Duchess descended the balcony stairs slowly, each step measured, her black-gloved hand trailing along the silver rail. How touching. The queen finds comfort in a stranger's jokes while her court bleeds loyalty into the floor. There was no blood, no violence, just the phrase, cold and theatrical, meant to remind everyone that politics could dress cruelty as sacrifice. Daniel kept his eyes on her. If loyalty means letting her burn at sunrise because paperwork was not ready, maybe your definition needs work. Several vampires looked down. Marceline stopped halfway down the stairs. You see, this is the danger. He does not understand rank. He does not understand consequence. He has known our queen for less than an hour and already believes himself entitled to speak over centuries. Daniel looked at Evangeline. For the first time, she did not look alone. Not safe, exactly, but less alone. That mattered more than the court wanted it to. Lord Vere stepped beside the recovery table. The throne recognized his mark because royal blood touched a willing hand during dawn peril. Blood law states that when the crown is carried through, certain death by one who seeks no reward, the throne must shield the bearer as essential witness and protector. Daniel blinked. So, I am a witness. And a shield, Vere said. Not owner, not ruler, not consort by force. A living proof that the crown was saved by voluntary mercy. The explanation hit the hall like a stone dropped into dark water. Daniel saw the shape of it then. The mark was not a romantic trap. It was not a chain around Evangeline or him. It was the throne itself refusing to let the court erase what had happened outside. A mechanic had carried the dying queen through sunrise when her own system failed. Now the throne had made him inconveniently impossible to ignore. Marceline's face hardened. A charming interpretation, but incomplete. She lifted one hand, and a black crystal unfolded above her palm, projecting a sealed record into the air. Before dawn, Queen Evangeline left the Western Sanctuary without guard approval. She crossed a disputed gate. She exposed herself to sunlight. She endangered succession stability. The court must ask why. The hall murmured. Evangeline closed her eyes for one moment. Daniel saw it then. The thing she had been hiding beneath the torn royal fabric and the pain. Not guilt. Grief. Because I received a message, Evangeline said. Her voice was quiet enough that the court had to lean in to hear. From the old mining road. It carried my mother's cipher. Lord Vere went rigid. The late queen's cipher was sealed. It should have been. Marceline's eyes sharpened, and Daniel knew before anyone else reacted that she had not expected Evangeline to say that in public. Evangeline turned her face toward the court, still lying under the healing lights, too weak to stand, too powerful to be dismissed. The message said a human settlement near Red Hollow would be blamed for harboring Solari weapons. If I did not personally inspect the gate before sunrise, my generals would answer with fear. I went alone because every guard route had already been compromised. I thought secrecy would prevent conflict. Daniel felt the room tilt again. She had not been fleeing duty. She had been trying to prevent a human town from becoming the excuse for a vampire crackdown. The queen everyone treated like a dangerous symbol had nearly died because she chose restraint. Marceline's fingers closed around the crystal. Conveniently noble. Conveniently verifiable, Daniel said. He lifted his marked hand, unsure what he was doing until the throne answered. The red crown light stretched toward Marceline's crystal. Blue lines sparked across the projection, pulling hidden layers to the surface. A second signature appeared beneath the message. Not Evangeline's mother. Not Solari. A court seal disguised under old royal cipher. The hall recognized it before Daniel did. Lord Vere's voice dropped into shock. Duchess Marceline. The Duchess's perfect expression finally cracked. Only a little, but enough. Evangeline opened her eyes fully, crimson and clear now, the wound inside her turning into certainty. You sent the message. Marceline lowered the crystal, her smile gone. I gave you a chance to prove you were still the queen we needed. By leading me into dawn. By forcing the throne to reveal whether it would still protect you. Daniel stepped between the recovery table and Marceline without thinking. The mark on his palm flared, and the red crown above the throne moved with him, casting its shadow over Evangeline. The entire court inhaled as one. Marceline looked at Daniel with cold fury. There it is. The human shield. The weakness made sacred. Daniel's voice came out quieter than he expected. No. The reminder. Evangeline turned her head toward him. Of what? He looked around the hidden palace, at the bowed healers, the silent guards, the beautiful terrified nobles, and finally back at the queen. That power which cannot be carried when it falls is not strength. It is just weight. The throne answered with a deep red pulse that rolled through every stone in the hall. Above them, the suspended crown stopped flickering. Evangeline's healing light turned from blue to silver white. She drew one steady breath, and for the first time since Daniel found her in the desert, she did not look like she was surviving the room. She looked like she was about to rule it. Then the throne gate behind them sealed shut with a sound like a final page closing, and every exit in the underground court locked at once. Lord Vare looked toward the doors, then toward Marceline. No one leaves until Bloodlaw finishes speaking. The sealed court did not feel safer once the doors locked. It felt honest. Daniel stood between Queen Evangeline and Duchess Marceline with the red crown light, casting his shadow across the black stone floor, and for the first time since sunrise, every vampire in the hall had stopped pretending this was ceremony. The healers remained beside the recovery table, their silver-white light still moving over Evangeline's skin, but the queen no longer looked like a patient. She looked like a storm that had been asked to wait politely. Above the throne, the suspended crown pulsed once, then lowered a thin beam of red light onto Daniel's marked palm. Symbols unfolded across his skin, circling the thorned throne mark like words written in frost. He could not read them, but he felt their meaning arrive in pieces. Witness, shield, choice, debt, mercy. Lord Vare stepped closer, his silver hair bright under the crown light. Bloodlaw has entered testimony phase. Daniel looked at him. That sounds like something I should have a lawyer for. You have the throne. That is not as comforting as you think. Evangeline's mouth softened for half a second, but Marceline cut across it. This is absurd. He is a human outsider. His memories are unstable, his judgment emotional, and his presence contaminates succession. The mark on Daniel's palm cooled sharply, and the floor answered before anyone else could. A ring of dark red light spread from his boots across the hall. Wherever it passed, reflections rose from the stone, not illusions exactly, but memory made visible. The desert road appeared beneath their feet, the ruined mine arch, the black ash, the first edge of dawn. The court watched Daniel's memory replay in silence as he saw Evangeline again beneath the stone arch, proud even as the sunrise closed in on her. He felt again the decision to run toward her when every sensible part of him had screamed to stay in the van. He saw himself kneel, wrap his coat around her, lift her with both arms, and carry her toward shade while the buried gate awakened. No one spoke. No one could edit it. Bloodlaw did not show heroism as a song. It showed the awkward truth of it. A tired man stumbling over gravel, terrified, underprepared, and choosing to help anyway. The memory faded. The red ring stopped at Marceline's feet. There, Daniel said quietly. That is my unstable judgment. A few guards lowered their eyes. One healer pressed a hand to her chest. Lord Vare's voice came out lower than before. The throne accepts the human's testimony. Marceline's face remained composed, but her fingers tightened at her side. Fine. He carried her. No one disputes the physical act. But blood law does not exist to reward impulse. It exists to preserve the crown. If the throne has shielded him, then let it answer this. Does the human become leverage over the queen? Does every enemy now need only threaten Daniel Mercer to bend Evangeline Noctara? The question struck harder than the insult. Daniel felt it in the way the court shifted. Marceline had found the fear beneath their outrage. Even Daniel could not dismiss it. He was a mechanic, not a soldier, not a mortal, not built for the politics of hidden kingdoms. If protecting him now became part of protecting the throne, then maybe he really was the weakest point in the room. Evangeline pushed herself upright before the healers could stop her. The silver-white light clung to her shoulders like mist, and though she still looked pale, her crimson eyes had cleared. Do not dress cowardice as concern for me, she said. Marceline turned toward her. I am the only one in this court saying what they all fear. No, Evangeline replied. You are saying what you need them to fear. The queen swung her feet to the floor. Every healer bowed back at once. Daniel stepped closer, instinctively ready to help, but Evangeline lifted one hand, not rejecting him, simply choosing to stand by herself. That mattered. The court saw it. She rose slowly, the protective mantle falling around her like night restored to its rightful shape. You wanted me to come back broken, she said to Marceline. You wanted the throne to either abandon me or bind me to someone the court could despise. You failed because you misunderstood the law you tried to provoke. The suspended crown brightened. Evangeline walked toward Daniel, each step steady now. Blood law does not make Daniel my weakness. It makes him the public witness to the moment the court failed and a stranger did not. Her words moved through the hall with more force than the crown light. He is not leverage unless I become the kind of ruler who hides what she values. I will not. Daniel felt the air leave him. He had been thanked before, usually with a rushed handshake and sometimes a check that cleared late. He had never been defended in front of an ancient court by a queen who had every reason to push him away for political convenience. Marceline's eyes narrowed. Then you admit attachment. Evangeline looked at Daniel. Not long, not softly enough to become spectacle, but honestly. I admit gratitude. I admit trust earned under Dawn. I admit that I am tired of a throne that asks me to survive alone so others can call it strength. The hall absorbed that in stunned quiet. Somewhere high above, a black banner loosened from its hook and fell silently to the balcony floor. Marceline glanced at it, then back to Evangeline. Pretty words will not settle the law. No, Evangeline said. Choice will. She turned to Lord Vere. State the final clause. Lord Vere hesitated. His voice became formal, reluctant, and clear. When blood law shields a mortal witness, the crown may accept the shield, reject the shield, or release the witness from all claim. If accepted, the witness becomes throne protected until the crisis ends. If rejected, the mark fades and the court may erase the testimony from succession record. Daniel stared at him. Erase it. Vere did not look away. Legally, yes. Daniel understood then why Marceline was smiling again. If Evangeline accepted him, she admitted the court failed publicly. If she rejected him, she lost the protection and the truth he carried. If she released him, he walked away safe. But Marceline could twist that into proof that the queen had depended on a human only until he became inconvenient. It was not a trial. It was a trap with formal vocabulary. Evangeline turned toward Daniel. You should know the cost before I choose. I am getting used to costs appearing late. If I accept your shield, the court must protect you, but your life becomes entangled with mine until this conspiracy is judged. You would not be prisoner, but you would not be ordinary again. Every house would know your name. My landlord already knows my name, and he is scarier than half this room. A few shocked faces turned toward each other, as if unsure whether laughter was treason. Evangeline's eyes warmed, but her voice remained serious. Daniel, I can release you now. You did enough. More than enough. Marceline watched closely, waiting for him to choose fear or for Evangeline to choose loneliness. Daniel looked at his marked palm, then at the court, then at the woman he had carried through Dawn because leaving her there had been unthinkable. Can I ask one thing before anyone makes this ancient and dramatic? Evangeline nodded. Ask. If you release me, does she get to bury what happened? His eyes moved toward Marceline. Lord Vere answered. The testimony becomes vulnerable to challenge. Daniel let out a slow breath. Then I would rather remain inconvenient. The mark flared red-blue, bright enough to make every shadow retreat. Evangeline closed her eyes for one heartbeat, and when she opened them, the queen was fully there. Not protected by Daniel. Standing with him. Then before blood law and crimson court, she said, I accept Daniel Mercer as throne shield until the conspiracy against my crown is judged. I accept the witness. I accept the debt. I accept the shame this court tried to hide. The crown above the throne descended another foot, bathing them both in red light. Every sword in the hall lowered by itself, not in surrender, but recognition. Marceline stepped back, and for the first time, real fear touched her face. Then the floor beneath the throne opened, revealing a hidden stairway descending into darkness. Lord Vere went pale. The law calls for the root record. Evangeline looked into the opening, then at Marceline. Good. Let us see who else helped you lead me into Dawn. The hidden stairway did not descend into a dungeon. It descended into memory. Daniel followed Queen Evangeline beneath the throne with the court moving behind them in a slow, uneasy procession, their lowered swords reflecting the red-blue glow of his marked palm. The steps were black stone, worn smooth at the center by centuries of rulers who had come down here only when ceremony failed and truth became unavoidable. The air grew colder with every step, but not like the desert dawn or the palace hall. This cold felt archived, deliberate, the temperature of secrets preserved too long. Evangeline walked ahead of him, no longer leaning on anyone, yet Daniel stayed close enough that if her strength faltered, he could catch her before pride had time to object. She knew. He knew she knew. Neither of them said it. Lord Vere carried a silver lamp that did not throw ordinary light. It revealed carvings in the walls as they passed. Queens crowned beneath eclipses, kings kneeling before empty thrones, human figures standing at the edges of vampire history with their faces scraped away by time. Daniel slowed when he noticed that last detail. Were there others? He asked. Evangeline stopped, looking at the erased human shapes. For a moment the queen's face was unreadable, but the woman beneath it looked wounded in a place no healer could reach. The court said the blood law had not chosen a human in 1,000 years, she said. Lord Vere lowered his gaze. That is what the official record states. Daniel looked at the scraped faces. And the wall. No one answered quickly enough. The mark on his palm cooled, and the carvings glowed in response, red light filling the grooves where names had been removed. Evangeline turned slowly toward Vere. You knew? The old vampire's face tightened. I knew there were omissions. I did not know their extent. Marceline, escorted behind them by 2 silent guards, gave a bitter laugh. All thrones omit. That is how history becomes useful. Evangeline's crimson eyes moved to her. No, that is how fear becomes tradition. The stairway ended at a circular chamber beneath the throne, surrounded by shelves of black crystal tablets suspended in the air like frozen pages. At the center stood a round table of dark glass filled with slow-moving crimson liquid light, not blood, but something symbolic and ancient, reflecting faces that were not physically present. The moment Daniel entered, every tablet turned toward him. Some glowed red, some blue, some remained dark, as if ashamed. The throne mark on his palm spread into fine lines across his wrist, and the chamber answered with a low hum that made the court above them feel suddenly small. Lord Vere spoke softly. The root record. No court seal can alter what is stored here. Only blood law can open it. Daniel looked at Evangeline. So what do I do? Marceline stepped forward before anyone could respond. You leave. That would be the first wise choice you have made today. Daniel turned. She no longer looked untouchable. Beautiful, yes. Powerful, yes. But the polished certainty had cracked, and behind it was someone who had spent too long mistaking control for survival. Noted, he said. I am still waiting on the second wise choice. Evangeline held out her hand, not touching his palm, leaving the space between them open. Blood law began with your choice. It will continue only if you choose again. Place your marked hand on the table if you want the record opened. Refuse, and the court cannot force you. What happens to you if I refuse? The conspiracy remains contested. Marceline's faction can delay judgment for years. And if I do it? Lord Vere answered with visible reluctance. Every hidden record tied to the Queen's Dawn route will be revealed before sworn witnesses. But the law will also bind your testimony to the throne until judgment ends. Your name becomes part of royal history. Daniel stared at the table. That was the thing about choices, he thought. The real ones never looked like grand destiny when they arrived. They looked like extra work, more risk, a door you could walk away from while everyone waited to see what kind of person you were when nobody could pay you enough. Evangeline's voice softened. You have already carried more than I had any right to ask. You did not ask the first time. No, she said. You answered anyway. That should not have mattered as much as it did. Daniel placed his marked hand on the table. The crimson liquid light went still, then rose in a column around his wrist without wetting his skin. The chamber opened. Images unfolded in the air, clear and silent. Marceline receiving the sealed cipher. Marceline altering the Queen's route. Marceline delaying the guard detail by 14 minutes. A hidden council of Western houses agreeing that a weakened queen could be managed. A private order sent to provoke a dawn crisis without openly ending Evangeline's reign. No gore. No battlefield. Just signatures, voices, formal language, and the terrifying neatness of powerful people making cruelty sound administrative. The court witnesses watched in pale silence. Then the record shifted further back. Daniel saw another queen, older but with Evangeline's eyes, standing in this same chamber years before. Queen Isolde, Evangeline's mother. Her voice filled the room from the past. If the blood law ever chooses beyond the houses again, the court will panic. They fear any bond they cannot purchase. But my daughter must one day learn what I learned too late. A crown guarded only by fear becomes a prison. Evangeline stopped breathing. Marceline's face went white in a way even vampires should not have managed. The past record continued. Queen Isolde turned toward someone outside the image. Do not erase the human guardians. Restore them when she is ready. The throne must remember mercy, or it will devour her. The image faded. No one moved. Daniel looked from Evangeline to Marceline and understood the deeper betrayal. Marceline had not only twisted the dead queen's fears. She had buried the dead queen's warning. Evangeline stood utterly still, but her eyes shone with grief made sharper by relief. My mother did not want the law destroyed, she said. She wanted it understood. Marceline's voice dropped to a whisper. She was afraid for you. So you made her fear into a cage. The root chamber pulsed once, and every erased carving on the stairway above relit behind them. Names returning to the wall in red and blue. Human guardians. Mortal. Witnesses. Oath-bearers. Not owners. Not scandals. Proof that the throne had survived before because someone outside power chose to protect the person inside it. Lord Vere knelt first. His silver lamp lowered until it touched the stone. The root record condemns obstruction. Duchess Marceline, your claim is broken. The other witnesses followed, one by one, kneeling not to Daniel, but to the truth his choice had uncovered. Marceline did not kneel. She looked at Evangeline with fury, grief, and a strange hollow devotion that had rotted into control. A queen who trusts softness will be used. Evangeline stepped close to her, not cruel, not forgiving, not weak. Then I will build a court where softness is not the same as surrender. She turned to Daniel. And where a human life is not erased because it embarrasses noble blood. The mark on Daniel's hand warmed, gentle for the first time. Above them, the sealed doors of the throne hall opened, and from far overhead came the sound of the entire Crimson Court rising to witness what the root record had restored. Evangeline lifted her broken black crown from a pedestal beside the table and held it in both hands. Take us back, she said. The court has heard the past. Now it will answer to the living. The Crimson Court rose before Evangeline returned, but it did not rise in honor. It rose because the ground beneath the throne had begun to remember. Daniel came up the black stairway behind the queen with the restored names still glowing along the walls behind them, red and blue letters spilling into the throne hall like dawn seen through deep water. Every noble in the chamber saw them. Human names. Mortal witnesses. Guardians erased from official history because their existence made the bloodlines look less absolute. The silence that followed was not respectful. It was afraid. Evangeline walked to the center of the hall carrying the broken black crown in both hands, her white skin luminous under the silver recovery light still clinging faintly to her shoulders, her dark hair loose from the struggle, her crimson eyes clear in a way Daniel had not seen before. She was no longer the dying woman he had found under stone, and not yet the distant statue her court wanted to crown. She was something more dangerous to them than either. She was present. Lord Vere stepped to her right, holding the root record lamp. Daniel stood to her left, dusty, human, and painfully aware that every vampire in the room could hear his heartbeat moving faster than he wanted it to. Duchess Marceline stood several yards away, guarded but unbowed, her face pale with contained fury. Around her, the Western nobles who had supported her looked smaller now, not less elegant, not less powerful, but suddenly less certain that history would protect them. Evangeline lifted the broken crown. The root record has spoken, she said. Her voice carried without effort, filling the buried palace from the lowest stair to the highest balcony. The court concealed the existence of mortal guardians. The court erased testimony that proved the throne was never meant to survive on fear alone. Duchess Marceline used that concealment to challenge my reign, endanger human settlements, and lead me into dawn under a false message. Marceline's chin rose. I did what was necessary to keep the throne from becoming dependent. No, Evangeline said. You did what frightened people have always done. You mistook control for safety. A murmur moved through the court, but no one defended the Duchess. Daniel watched that too. The same nobles who had whispered against the queen now studied the floor as if guilt could become invisible with enough posture. Evangeline turned slowly, letting her gaze pass over every balcony. But this is not only Marceline's crime. A court does not erase names for centuries because one woman commands it. This hall inherited a lie, polished it, taught it, and called it tradition. The words landed harder than an accusation because no one could pretend they were untrue. The restored names along the wall burned brighter. Daniel saw some of the nobles flinch when human faces reappeared in the carved history above them, not as servants, not as victims, but as oath-bearers standing beside vampire rulers during old crises. One carving showed a human woman holding a lantern beside a wounded king. Another showed a human man carrying a child beneath an eclipse. Another showed a mortal farmer offering shelter to a queen whose crown had fallen into snow. None of them looked powerful in the way courts understood power. All of them looked like people who had chosen not to turn away. Daniel felt the mark on his palm warm as if recognizing its ancestors. Lord Vere lowered his head. "Your Majesty, under blood law, judgment must be issued. The court awaits your decree." Marceline laughed once, softly. "Yes, decree. That is the part where mercy becomes difficult. Will you imprison half your nobles? Strip every house that stayed silent. Punish those who inherited what they did not create." Evangeline looked at her, and Daniel realized Marceline was still trying to control the shape of the room. If Evangeline became harsh, the Duchess would call her unstable. If Evangeline became gentle, the Duchess would call her weak. It was a trap built from expectations. Evangeline stepped out of it. The houses that directly signed the Dawn conspiracy will surrender authority pending trial by root record. Their military command, gate access, and succession votes are suspended immediately. Several Western nobles went rigid, but the crown light above the throne flashed, and their seals appeared in the air, already bound by the evidence Daniel had helped reveal. Those who stayed silent out of fear will not be punished for fear, Evangeline continued. But they will answer for what fear allowed. Every house will open its archives. Every erased guardian record will be restored. Every human settlement named in court security policy will receive direct embassy protection until the new accords are written. Daniel looked at her then. Embassy protection. Not a vague promise. Not pretty words. A real change in how humans and vampires would share borders. The underground hall shifted under the weight of it. Marceline's expression tightened. You would place humans inside royal policy because one man carried you through sunrise. Evangeline turned toward Daniel, and the public attention followed. He suddenly wished he had washed his face before history got involved. "One man did what my court failed to do," she said. "He saw danger and answered without asking whether mercy was politically useful. That does not make humans superior to vampires. It makes our old arrogance incomplete." Daniel swallowed. He had never been good at being praised, especially by people with crowns. "For what it is worth," he said, "I was mostly trying not to drop you." The hall did not know what to do with that. A few younger guards looked like they might smile, then remembered where they were. Evangeline did smile, only slightly, and that small human reaction unsettled the court more than anger would have. Then Marceline moved one step forward. The guards tensed, but Evangeline raised her hand and stopped them. The Duchess looked not at Daniel, but at the Queen. "If you keep him near you, every enemy will study him. Every house will weigh him. Every human weakness he has will become a door into your reign." Evangeline's face softened, not with agreement, but with something like pity. "You still believe strength is the absence of doors. Strength is making sure no one can enter without permission." "No," Evangeline said. "That is loneliness with armor on." The word struck the hall so cleanly that even Marceline had no immediate reply. Daniel saw something pass across the Duchess's face then, a grief so old it had hardened into doctrine. For 1 second, he understood her. He did not forgive her, but he understood the shape of the fear that had made her dangerous. Evangeline understood it too, and because she understood it, her next words carried more weight. "Marceline, you will be removed from the Western seat and held under court protection until root trial. You will not be harmed. You will not be erased. The record will keep your name exactly where your choices placed it." The Duchess went still. To a court built on memory, that was both mercy and sentence. Lord Vere struck his staff once. "The decree stands by blood law." One by one, the suspended seals of the conspirators dimmed and settled into silver custody rings above the floor. No swords rose. No one rushed forward. The conflict ended not with spectacle, but with authority finally landing where it belonged. Then the broken black crown in Evangeline's hands began to change. The jagged edges smoothed, but did not disappear. Thin blue lines threaded through the dark metal, matching the mark on Daniel's palm. The throne was not making him ruler. It was recording the truth that her reign had been carried, witnessed, and chosen in public. Evangeline looked at the transformed crown, then at Daniel. Blood law requires one more answer before judgment closes. Daniel tried not to sigh. Ancient law has a lot of paperwork. This answer is yours. The court went silent again. Evangeline held his gaze. You may release the mark now. The conspiracy has been judged. You may return to your van, your road, your life, and the throne will protect you from retaliation. No debt will follow you. Daniel looked down at his palm. The thorned throne mark glowed gently, waiting. For the first time all morning, it did not feel like it was pulling him anywhere. It felt like a door left open in both directions. He thought of the desert highway above them, the dead communications beacon, the thermos in his van, the bills in the glove compartment, the ordinary life he had cursed 100 times and suddenly missed because it was simple. Then he looked at Evangeline, standing before a court that had tried to turn her survival into a scandal, offering him freedom in front of everyone so no one could claim she had trapped him. That choice told him more about her than any crown could. I am not staying because of the mark, Daniel said. His voice echoed through the hall with less confidence than a royal speech, but more honesty than the room seemed used to. I am staying because I carried a person through sunrise, and somewhere between the mine road and this throne, I decided I did not want the world to go back to pretending people like her have to stand alone. Evangeline's crimson eyes brightened. She did not reach for him. Not yet. She turned to the court first, because this choice had to be hers too. Then hear me clearly. Daniel Mercer remains by my invitation and his will, not by ownership, spell, claim, or debt. He is throne shield, mortal witness, and ambassador to the human settlements. Under my protection, any insult to his humanity is an insult to my reign. The response came slowly, then all at once. Swords lowered, heads bowed. Even the nobles who hated it understood that the old law had closed around the truth. Lord Vere knelt first, then the healers, then the guards, then the balconies of the Crimson Court until the buried palace became a field of lowered silver and silent recognition. Daniel stood beside the vampire queen with dust still on his boots, the new crown shining above her dark hair, and the mark on his palm warm as a steady promise. Far above, beyond stone and desert, the dawn continued to rise. This time, the throne did not hide from it. The throne hall remained bowed long after the decree settled, as if the Crimson Court needed time to understand that the world had changed and no one had asked its permission. Daniel stood beside Queen Evangeline with the mark on his palm glowing warm and steady, while the newly reshaped crown hovered above her dark hair before lowering into place. The court had accepted the judgment. Marceline's authority had been stripped. The conspirators' seals were sealed in silver custody rings above the floor. By every formal measure, the crisis should have been over. Daniel should have felt relief. Instead, he felt the quiet that comes after a machine stops making the wrong noise, and you realize another sound underneath it has been there the whole time. Evangeline noticed before anyone else. Her eyes moved across the hall, past the kneeling nobles, past Lord Vere, past the restored human names glowing along the stairway wall, and settled on the black throne itself. The suspended crown light above it had steadied, but the throne beneath remained dark. Not asleep. Waiting. Why is the throne still locked? She asked. No one answered. Lord Vere rose slowly, the silver lamp in his hand dimming. The court judgment has closed. Evangeline looked at him. That was not my question. The old vampire's face tightened. Before he could speak, the floor beneath the throne pulsed once in red-blue light, and a second ring of symbols opened around Daniel and Evangeline. Every sword on the floor vibrated softly. The nobles lifted their heads in fear, confusion, and something like recognition. Marceline, held beneath the western balcony by two silent guards, began to laugh. It was not victorious laughter. It was broken, bitter, and almost relieved. There it is, she whispered. The part none of you wish to remember. Daniel looked at Evangeline. Please tell me ancient law is not doing a surprise encore. Evangeline did not smile. Vere. Lord Vere lowered his eyes. There is an older clause. The hall grew colder. Older than the throne shield. Daniel asked. Bound to it, Vere said. When a mortal witness restores an erased record, blood law does not simply protect him. It asks the crown to answer whether the restored truth will become policy or remain memory. Daniel frowned. Meaning? Evangeline's voice was quiet. Meaning the throne is asking whether I will only punish the conspiracy or change the system that made it possible. The mark on Daniel's palm brightened at her words. Around the hall, the restored carvings of human guardians glowed again, and their return names stretched into the black glass floor like roads. One road led toward the palace gate, one toward the desert above, one toward the human town of Red Hollow. A heavy silence settled over the court. Daniel finally understood why no one had explained this part earlier. This was not about Marceline anymore. This was about what came after. It was one thing for the vampire court to admit that a human had saved the queen. It was another to let that truth change border law, court tradition, and the relationship between two worlds that had survived for generations by keeping fear organized. Marceline lifted her head. You see, Evangeline, judgment was easy. Reform will cost you houses, armies, alliances. They bowed because the law cornered them. They will resist the moment mercy asks for paperwork. Daniel hated how reasonable that sounded. Not right, but reasonable. He had seen it in towns, companies, and county offices. Everyone liked a rescue story until it became a budget line, a policy change, a key handed to someone who had never been allowed inside. Evangeline stepped down from the central dais and walked toward the path of blue light leading to Red Hollow. Each step made the crown above her head shine brighter. For 3 centuries, the Crimson Court has treated human settlements near our hidden gates as hazards, buffers, or excuses, she said. That ends today. A noble in a high eastern balcony rose halfway. Your Majesty, opening formal protection to human towns will reveal our routes. Then our routes will no longer depend on secrecy alone. Another voice answered from the western tier, careful and cold. Human governments will ask questions. Human media will notice missing roads, hidden property records, restricted airspace. Daniel almost raised a hand, then realized he was allowed to speak now and did not need permission from anyone who looked like they had never pumped their own gas. They already notice, he said. The court turned to him. People in places like Red Hollow know something is wrong. They know which roads go cold at night, which mines nobody buys, but nobody tears down, which officials tell them not to ask about lights in the desert. You are not invisible. You are just unaccountable. The words hit harder than he expected. Evangeline looked at him, and in her eyes Daniel saw not gratitude this time, but decision. She turned back to the court. Daniel Mercer will not be hidden as an embarrassing exception. He will serve as mortal witness to the restored Guardian Archive and first ambassador under the Dawn Accord. The hall stirred at the name. Dawn Accord. Daniel felt that one land in history before he had time to panic about it. I am sorry, he said under his breath. First what? Evangeline answered without looking away from the nobles. A bridge between the throne and the human settlements under its shadow. Paid, protected, and free to resign. That last part mattered. She said it loudly enough for every ancient ear to hear. Free to resign. Not owned. Not bound. Not collected by the throne like a relic. Daniel looked down at the mark. It glowed in approval, but it did not pull. Marceline's face twisted. You are inviting humanity into a court built to survive them. Evangeline finally turned to her. No, I am admitting. Humanity was already part of our survival, and we erased the evidence because gratitude embarrassed us. The black throne responded. Its dark surface cracked with lines of silver blue light, not breaking, but opening like frozen earth under spring thaw. From within the throne, dozens of small lights rose, each one shaped like a name, and drifted toward the restored carvings. The erased guardians were not only remembered now, they were seated back into law. Lord Vare dropped to one knee again, but this time he was not alone. The law priests followed, then the archivists, then the guard captains. The nobles were slower. Some bowed with conviction. Some bowed with fear. Some bowed because history had moved and left them no dignified place to stand. Daniel watched Evangeline receive it all without triumph. That was when he understood the real twist. Blood law had not chosen him to make him powerful. It had chosen him to make her impossible to isolate. A queen surrounded by witnesses could still be opposed, challenged, even hated, but she could not be quietly erased. Evangeline stepped beside Daniel and offered her hand, palm up, public and deliberate. Not a command. An invitation. The court watched. Daniel knew what taking it would mean. Not romance staged for nobles. Not a claim. A statement that the human witness and the vampire queen were entering the next era together by choice. He took her hand. It was cold, but not lifeless. Strong, steady, and real. The mark on his palm met the red light of her crown, and the two colors softened into a warm violet glow. Above them, the throne gate opened toward the desert surface. For the first time, it did not open in darkness. It opened toward daylight filtered through a broad veil of crimson shade. Evangeline looked at the court, her voice calm enough to make resistance feel smaller. Prepare the first envoy to Red Hollow. The dawn we feared will be witnessed, not hidden. Daniel glanced toward the open gate and the bright desert beyond. You know, he said softly, my van is still parked out there. Evangeline's eyes warmed. Then our first diplomatic act will be returning it. Somewhere among the younger guards, someone failed to hide a laugh. The sound was brief, startled, and human in all the ways the court had forgotten it could be. Then the Crimson Court rose as one, not fully united, not magically healed, but forced into a new posture before a queen who had chosen change and a mechanic who had chosen to stay. At the threshold above, dawn waited behind the shade, no longer a sentence, but a test they would walk into together. The first envoy to Red Hollow did not look like an invasion, but Daniel knew the town would not understand that at first. From the palace gate beneath the mine road, the Crimson Court prepared a procession of black vehicles, shaded canopies, silver-armored guards, and law priests carrying restored records in crystal cases. Everything was elegant, silent, and terrifying in the way only vampire politics could be terrifying while technically behaving itself. Daniel stood beside his battered service van at the edge of the desert road, watching two royal mechanics examine the engine with the grave focus of surgeons. One of them looked at the cracked windshield, the dust-choked radiator, and the fast food napkins on the passenger floor, then bowed to Daniel as if the van were a sacred relic. This vehicle has endured significant hardship, the mechanic said. Daniel nodded. So have I, but nobody polished me. Queen Evangeline heard him from beneath the crimson shade canopy and gave the smallest smile. She wore the reshaped black crown now, its blue lines catching the filtered daylight, her pale white skin protected by a soft veil of shadow woven from the throne gate itself. She looked stronger, but Daniel could see the cost of the morning in the way she held still between movements. Power had returned to her, yet she was using it carefully, like someone choosing not to become the thing that had hurt her. Lord Vare approached with a crystal document in both hands. The Dawn Accord draft is prepared for first witness delivery. Human settlement leaders will be informed of protected status, neutral gate boundaries, and emergency contact law. Daniel looked at the document. That sounds official enough to scare every mayor within 50 miles. That is not our intention. Intentions are nice. People react to presentation. Evangeline turned toward him. Then advise us. The court around them went quiet. Daniel realized they expected him to produce some grand diplomatic insight. He looked past the shaded vehicles toward the town miles away, where people were probably buying gas, opening diners, walking dogs, and not expecting an ancient vampire government to roll in with glowing paperwork before lunch. Fewer guards, he said. No drawn swords. No surrounding buildings. No midnight blue legal fog. And maybe let me talk first before anyone says something like mortal boundary compliance. A young law priest looked offended. That is the accurate term. Exactly the problem. Evangeline lifted one hand. Half the guards stepped back at once. Their armor dimmed from ceremonial silver to matte gray. The shade canopy softened, less like a royal eclipse and more like a dark awning. Daniel watched the transformation and felt the strange weight of being listened to in a room, or desert, full of people who could outlive highways. Then the red-blue mark on his palm suddenly cooled. Not warning. Direction. He turned toward the ridgeline above the old mine road. At first, he saw only heat shimmer. Then dust. Then 3 human trucks parked where no trucks had been minutes before. Not government. Not town. Private security, the kind hired by companies that had too much money and too few questions. Men and women stood beside the vehicles holding cameras, scanners, and long-range microphones, their posture nervous but determined. Red Hollow had noticed the gate. Of course it had. People always noticed more than powerful groups wanted to believe. Lord Vare's hand moved toward his staff. Daniel stepped in front of him. No, they may be Solari observers. They may be scared locals with equipment from a pawn shop. Evangeline watched the ridge carefully. Can you tell the difference? Not from here. Daniel started walking before anyone approved it. Evangeline followed. So did two guards, until she stopped them with a glance. The court watched their queen walk across open desert shade beside a human mechanic toward ordinary people who had no idea whether to run, record, or pray. The closer Daniel got, the more details he recognized. One of the trucks belonged to Red Hollow Public Works. Another carried the faded logo of a local news channel. A woman in a denim jacket held a camera with both hands, face pale but steady. Beside her stood Sheriff Alan Briggs, a white-haired man Daniel knew mostly from speeding warnings and bad coffee at the diner. The sheriff looked at Daniel, then at Evangeline, then at the crowned gate behind them. Daniel, he called slowly, please tell me this is a movie shoot. Daniel stopped 10 feet away and sighed. I would love to. The reporter swallowed. Is she dangerous? Evangeline did not answer first. She let Daniel choose the shape of the first bridge. That mattered. Daniel looked back at her, then at the sheriff. She is a queen. So yes, in the way all powerful people are dangerous. But she came here to stop your town from being framed, and she nearly died doing it. The sheriff's expression changed. Not trust. Not yet. But attention. The reporter lowered her camera slightly. Evangeline stepped forward into the edge of the shade, crown dimmed, hands visible, posture regal without threat. My court has hidden too much from yours, she said, speaking clearly, not down to them, not above them. That secrecy was used to endanger your people and mine. It ends under my reign. The sheriff looked at Daniel. You believe that? Daniel thought of black crystal records, erased names, Marceline's cold logic, and Evangeline offering him freedom in front of the court. I believe she is choosing it while everyone important is watching. That is about as real as promises get. A sound came from behind them. The Crimson Court had approached, but not in formation. They stood at a respectful distance with lowered weapons and open hands. The restored guardian, names glowing faintly on the records they carried. Human witnesses on one side. Vampire court on the other. Desert wind in between. Evangeline turned so both groups could hear her. Red Hollow will not be threatened, erased, or blamed for the actions of hidden powers. The Dawn Accord recognizes human settlements near. Vampire gates as protected neighbors, not expendable cover. Daniel Mercer will serve as first mortal witness and may speak freely against my court if we violate that promise. Daniel blinked. Freely. Freely. That is going to make meetings interesting. I expect so. The sheriff looked from Daniel's glowing palm to Evangeline's crown. And if we refuse? Evangeline's answer came without hesitation. Then we leave your town in peace and keep our gate closed until invited to discuss terms. Protection cannot begin as coercion. That did more to shock the vampires than the humans. Daniel heard the shift behind him, the discomfort of an ancient court discovering that consent could be policy. The reporter raised her camera again, slower this time. Can I record that? Evangeline glanced at Daniel. He gave a tiny nod. Yes, the queen said. Record it fully. The red-blue mark on Daniel's palm warmed like approval. Above the old mine, the throne gate opened wider, not into darkness, but into a shaded hall where vampire soldiers lowered their swords point first before human witnesses. Sheriff Briggs removed his hat. Not a bow, not submission, just the plain respect of a man who understood that something impossible had chosen not to bully him. One by one, the court behind Evangeline lowered their heads to the town they had once treated like a map hazard. Daniel stood between them with dust on his boots and no speech prepared, feeling the bridge form under his feet. Then Evangeline looked at him, her crimson eyes calm beneath the shadowed crown. Ambassador Mercer, she said, formal enough for history and gentle enough for him alone. Shall we begin? Daniel looked at the sheriff, the reporter, the uneasy townspeople, the silent vampires, and the dawn filtering safely over all of them. Sure, he said. But first, somebody needs to tow my van. The tow truck arrived before the treaty table did, which somehow made the first public meeting between Red Hollow and the Crimson Court feel more real. Daniel stood in the gravel lot outside the old municipal fire station, watching Sheriff Briggs argue with a vampire engineer about whether a 1998 service van could be lifted by shadow suspension without damaging the frame. The vampire engineer insisted it would be elegant. The sheriff insisted the town already owned a perfectly good tow chain. Queen Evangeline stood beneath a wide crimson shade canopy at the edge of the lot, her black crown lined with blue light, her pale face calm under the filtered morning. Around her, the crimson court waited in disciplined silence, weapons lowered, armor dimmed, banners folded. Across from them stood the people of Red Hollow. The sheriff, the mayor, the local reporter, 2 firefighters, a diner owner still wearing an apron, and half the town watching from a cautious distance with phones in their hands. No one had been forced to attend. That was the first rule Evangeline had given, and the court had looked almost offended by how simple it sounded. Daniel respected it more than any speech. The Dawn Accord was signed on a folding plastic table borrowed from the fire station, because Daniel had taken one look at the black crystal altar the law priest brought and said no human mayor was signing anything that looked like it required a sacrifice. Evangeline did not argue. She ordered the altar removed and stood beside the folding table with such absolute dignity that even the plastic legs seemed embarrassed to wobble. Lord Vare read the terms aloud in plain English, after Daniel crossed out 6 phrases nobody outside a royal archive would understand. Red Hollow would be recognized as a protected neighbor settlement. No vampire house could use the town as cover, bait, or political leverage. Human residents would not be threatened for witnessing gate activity. Emergency contact lines would be established through Sheriff Briggs and Daniel Mercer, named in the document as mortal witness, throne shield by choice, and provisional ambassador between Red Hollow and the Crimson Court. In return, the town agreed not to expose gate locations publicly while negotiations continued, unless the court violated the accord first. That last clause made the vampires deeply uncomfortable. It made the humans listen. When the signatures were finished, the black throne gate beneath the old mine flashed once in the distance, and every vampire sword in the lot lowered point first to the ground. The sound was soft, metal touching dust, but it moved through the crowd like thunder. The mayor stared at the rows of ancient soldiers bowing before a town that had spent most of its history being ignored by maps. The reporter stopped filming for 1 second because her hands were shaking. Sheriff Briggs removed his hat again. "Well," he said, voice rough, "I guess that makes us neighbors." Evangeline inclined her head. "Neighbors who will speak before they fear." Daniel looked at the court and saw the cost of that promise. Some nobles bowed with respect. Some bowed because law required it. Some did not bow until Evangeline turned her crimson eyes on them and made their reluctance feel publicly small. She was not pretending the court had changed overnight. She was making the first change impossible to deny. Then Lord Vare brought forward the final matter, written on a thin sheet of black crystal no larger than a license plate. The crowd quieted as the old vampire faced Daniel. "Blood law has closed the Dawn crisis. The conspiracy has been judged. Duchess Marceline and the Western houses that signed the false route order are stripped of military command, gate authority, and succession vote until root trial is complete. Their records will remain public. Their names will not be erased." A murmur passed through both sides. Daniel saw Marceline standing under guard near the shade of a royal vehicle, no longer dressed like an untouchable power, but still proud enough to look at the court without lowering her head. Evangeline had not destroyed her. She had done something more lasting. She had made the truth impossible to bury. Vare turned the crystal toward Daniel. "Because judgment is closed, the throne must release you unless you choose otherwise. The mark may fade. You may return to private life. Your van has been repaired. Your debts will be settled as restitution for crown disruption. No blood, spell, court, or queen may compel you to remain." Every face turned toward him. Human and vampire. Camera lenses, crimson eyes, town gossip, royal law. Daniel looked down at his palm. The thorned throne. Mark glowed gently, waiting like a porch light rather than a chain. He thought of how it had begun, one drop of Evangeline's blood touching his skin while he carried her through sunrise. Now he understood it clearly. Blood law was not ownership, not marriage, not a curse. It was an ancient witness bond, awakened when a ruler's life was saved by someone acting without reward. The throne had protected him because his choice proved the queen had been abandoned by her own court, and saved by mercy. The bond could not force loyalty. It could only preserve the truth until both people chose what came next. Evangeline stepped forward before Daniel answered. Her voice carried to the court, the town, and the cameras. Daniel Mercer is free. I release every claim the throne could make on him. If he leaves now, he leaves honored. If any house punishes him, insults him, or touches his life in retaliation, they answer to me personally and publicly. The court went still. That was her agency, Daniel realized. Not a confession whispered in shadow. A choice made before everyone who could use it against her. She was choosing to protect him even if he walked away. She was accepting the political cost of valuing a human life in front of nobles who had built centuries of power on pretending such lives were footnotes. Daniel looked at his repaired van, now sitting at the edge of the lot cleaner than it had been in 10 years. He could leave. He could drive until Red Hollow became a weird shape in the rearview mirror. He could return to repair jobs, overdue bills, bad coffee, and ordinary mornings that did not involve royal decrees before breakfast. The door was open. That was why staying meant something. He turned back to Evangeline. I carried you because leaving you there was wrong, he said. I stayed because your court tried to make that wrong thing sound necessary. And I am choosing to remain because somebody should be around to remind both sides what this looked like before it became paperwork. Evangeline's eyes softened, but she did not move toward him like a queen claiming a prize. She stood straight, letting his choice remain his. Name your place, Daniel Mercer. He exhaled. Mortal witness. Throne shield by choice. Ambassador, if Red Hollow can survive my negotiating skills. Sheriff Briggs muttered, that is a big if. A laugh moved through the human crowd first, nervous and surprised. Then, astonishingly, a few vampire guards smiled. The mark on Daniel's palm brightened, not sharp now, but warm red-blue, matching the lines in Evangeline's crown. Lord Verne knelt in the gravel. The court followed, row by row, silver points lowered into desert dust. Then the humans did something no law had asked for. They did not kneel. They stepped closer. The sheriff stood beside Daniel. The mayor stood beside the signed accord. The reporter kept recording, tears in her eyes and fear still on her face, but her camera did not shake anymore. Evangeline turned toward the throne gate in the distance and raised one hand. The crimson shade canopy widened, not hiding the dawn, only making it safe enough for her people to stand beneath it. The vampires lifted their faces to filtered sunlight. Red Hollow watched the impossible become a neighbor. Daniel stood between them in dusty boots, with a queen at his side and a mark on his palm glowing like a promise he had chosen to keep. Far across the desert, the black gate opened to the hidden palace, and for the first time in its long history, the Crimson Court did not close it when humans looked inside.